Hi, everyone. And thank you, Beauty. Thank you to yourself and Leolo for inviting me to assist with this. I appreciate it. I think, as you've already mentioned, we have representatives from the Small Enterprise Development Agency. We also have representatives from NETLAC, the National Economic Development and Labour Council. We also have a representative from DIRCO, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. And finally, I see we do have a representative from the Department of International Trade and Competition. I think a more efficient way of doing it, rather than me butchering their bios, is to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and their background and the mandate of their organization. I wonder if you don't mind, Leah, if we start with you from the Small Enterprise Development Agency, if you mind just giving us an intro to yourself and a bit of a background on the mandate you have.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Corbin. My name is Leah Cherian. I am the specialist for export development and tree trades at SAYTA, or now SITFA. It's the Small Enterprise Development and Finance Agency. We've officially merged, and we are mandated to provide financial and non-financial support for SMMEs. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Leah. Heading over to NETLAC, and apologies if my pronunciation is wrong, but Mojalefa, is that correct?
Good afternoon. That is correct. Yes,
Okay,
from NetLac. I'll just switch on my camera for a while so that you can see that you're not talking to the AI, but I'm here. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Thompson. Yes, like I've said, I'm Mzal from NetLac. NetLac is an organization that was of the former minister Tito Mboweni. You would have heard NetLac being mentioned a number of times, as was part of
Oh, Mojalefa, it seems that the connection is quite bad. I'll tell you what, maybe we should switch videos off just to conserve some of the bandwidth.
And people would ask then, what is NetLac? I hope that assists. You'll let me know if you have any challenges. Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Much better. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, I'll introduce myself. I'm the manager responsible for trade and SMME at NetLac, which is the National Economic and Labor Council. NetLac is an agency the country our democracy of great together by the term social partners, four social partners, which is one government, which is represented by different departments and agencies within government. In the chamber that I'm in,
We seem to be losing you. I think we have lost Mojalefa entirely. Okay, while we wait for him to reconnect, maybe we can move on to Palesa from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Mojalefa, are you back? Unfortunately, the bandwidth on your side is really bad.
Yes, I got disconnected, but I'll try to move around. I hope it's
I'll tell you what, Mojalefa, we'll circle back to you.
Is this better?
It seems so.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It seems to be much better. Okay, I was just finishing off on my intro on NEDLAC. I am on the social partners. I've mentioned government. The other social partner would include business represented by BUSA, and then it would include labor represented by a number of federations from FEDUSA, COSATU, SACTU, and the likes. And then the other social partner in NEDLAC would include community, who we refer to as civil society. So just a bit on the Trade and Industry Chamber. We would then have a situation where we have a subcommittee, TESELICO, that looks at its South African international trade agreements, and then you'd have a sit around where business, labor would have an opportunity to input into South African trade agreements. This is unique to South Africa, as many other countries would not have a situation where government would first consult business and labor prior to signing or making any inputs to any of its trade agreements. I think for the introduction, I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Module, for that. Appreciate it. Unfortunately, technology, it's not always reliable. Moving on to Palesa from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. And here's hoping that our bandwidth stays steady. Palesa.
Good afternoon, Carbon Thompson. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Palesa Rachidi. I am from a department by the name of International Relations and Cooperation, DIRCO for short. We are responsible for the foreign relations that we have with bilateral entities, be it on a government level, but we're also responsible for any relations that we have on a multilateral basis. We have a footprint of just over 120 embassies abroad. We also have headquarters in Pretoria. I am responsible for trade, investment, and tourism promotion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Palesa. And finally, from the DTIC, or Department of International Trade and Competition, Sandile.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sandile Kini. I'm from the trade branch of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. As you know, the DTI is responsible for managing the economy, the real economy. And its aim is to ensure that the country industrializes, it creates jobs, and that growth and development of the economy is inclusive and ensures that all the citizens of the country benefit and that they are involved in the economic activity of the country. The trade branch is responsible for negotiating and managing all international trade agreements, as well as bilateral economic cooperation with all the countries in the world. My role is in particular, I'm responsible for the Africa multilateral economic relations of the department. And my portfolio involves being in charge of South Africa's participation in SACU, which is the Southern African Customs Union. I am also responsible for the trade and economic relations within the SADC, Southern African Development Community, in particular the SADC Trade Protocol. And also, I'm also responsible for any issues to do with economic relations within the African Union. Our department is in charge of the work program on economic and trade issues. And then also, we are also responsible for negotiating the African Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. So we're part of the negotiations, but we also manage those negotiations. And then through our minister, we report to the summit of heads of state. That happens mostly through the ministers of foreign affairs, in this case, the minister of DECO, from the colleague who just spoke. So basically, our role is more on trade policy and on negotiations. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sandile. Well, then moving on to the discussion, which is framed as exploring how South Africa's trade policy can be a mechanism for youth participation in trade. I'm going to start with yourself, Leah. Do you mind just answering what is trade policy and why is it important for South Africa's economic growth and development?
Okay, thank you, Corbin, for that. The trade policy, my understanding is that uh, it governs the policies or the agreements between two countries. So it is very important for SMMEs to be aware of what sort of policies or agreements have been set between countries, between a group of countries, so that they are able to benefit through the customs tariff concessions that normally comes about through these agreements. So it is very, very important that SMMEs are well versed and kept up to date with the policies and the agreements that are rendered. What are the do's and don'ts of trade in that country that you're looking at, and also just to see whether it is a target market for you. So it is very important for one to understand all the various aspects, but not in a high level point of view, but what is applicable from a SMME point of view. Thank you.
Fantastic, Leah. Thank you. And then just as a follow-up on that, can you explain some of the key components of trade policy, such as tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and trade agreements in simple terms for our audience who maybe haven't come across those terms before?
Okay, tariffs will usually focus in on what are the customs duties that you would be paying as a SMME, and sorry about that, I'm losing my connection. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So it's very important for SMMEs to understand that, because you need to be able to compete in a global market, and you need to be able to understand what are tariffs, what are the duties that is imposed on the goods that you want to import or to export. So they're used to generate revenue for the government, and it also protects the domestic industry for foreign competition. So some of the key considerations that a SMME has to keep in mind is that you need to look at the cost implications. Tariffs can increase the cost of imported raw materials or even exported products, and it reduces the profitability or even the competitiveness. So SMMEs always have to take that into consideration when they are looking at the costs. If you're, for example, going to bring in a product from India, for example, and if the customs duty for bringing in raw materials from India is high, you would have to consider that as a factor when you're costing your product, when you're going to be exporting your product. So we need to firstly look at the free trade agreements that are in place, because that would be your low-hanging fruits, especially like us for SADC, for example. And then look at the more, now that Africa free trade is coming into place, look at to see, bank on those kind of free trades and agreements where the customs tariff is much lower. Also, at the same time, I don't know how many of you are aware that the agreement between South Africa and UK, the UK has got almost 99% free trade for a lot of the South African products. So that is also a good way for you to consider. So you need to do your homework to see exactly where free trade or even low customs duties are in place. And then
it's a
the
fantastic
non-tariff
point, Leah.
And then the tariff measures would be aimed at making sure that you're safeguarding the health, the safety, environment, and that plays a big role, especially now when you're considering trading with the European Union. They're
Yeah.
very, very much into looking at the environment and organic, and so you need to make sure that the target market that you're selecting to export your products, you should be able to look at what are the needs, what are the requirements, what are the safety measures that you need to have in place, what are the health measures that you need to have in place, what are the bans that they have in place, so that you do not make a mistake. And exporting is a very costly affair. So you do not want to make a mistake of having to take your product, it gets to the border there, and then it being sent back because your product does not match the requirements of that country. So those are just key areas that SMMEs need to have in mind when they're looking at exporting.
Fantastic, Leah. You made a couple of really, really good points there. Just circling back to the point regarding the trade agreements that South Africa currently has at play, the UK SACUM EPA is a great example of an underutilized trade agreement at the moment. Another one, although it's not a trade agreement because it is non-reciprocal, the AGOA agreement, the African Growth and Opportunities Act, is also something that's very underutilized in a South African context. So thank you, Leah. Just around non-tariff barriers, to Leah's point, a great example of a newly instituted non-tariff barrier is the European Union's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which, although at the moment only covers particular sectors, it is an example of a newly instituted non-tariff barrier that could have implications on South African exports. So great examples there, Leah. Just a final question for you. Are there specific training or mentorship programs available to help young exporters navigate the complexities of trade?
Robin, now you're speaking my language. Thank you so much. SEDA or SEDFA has the Export Development Program. So we love talking about a journey of an entrepreneur. We do not want you to have a product and say, I am now ready for exporting, without having to check to see whether you are fully compliant with the South African Bureau of Standards, whether you meet the requirements of the international market that you want to trade your product with. So you, as a SEDFA client, you are taken through a journey of the business development services we offer. And once we see that through our export readiness assessment, we see that you are ready for export, we put you, or you've got the potential for export, we put you into our export development program. And the export development program is actually formed into 3 components. So one part of it is information sharing. This is one example of it. Over and above this, on a monthly basis, I normally conduct webinars with experts in various fields of export regarding subject matters like what are your risks with regards to exporting, your do's and don'ts of exporting, and we invite South African Bureau of Standards. We've got a large variety of topics that we normally cover. And then over and above that, we've got the international trade webinars, where we invite an embassy official or economic attaché to come and present on opportunities from that country. What are the imports and what are the export opportunities in the country. So you've got now a foot in the door at the embassy in South Africa, where you are able to converse, you're able to vet potential clients through the embassies. Then we've got the actual business development that happens at the SEDFA branches. Sorry, I need to get my tongue around this new organization. SEDFA branches, where they look at your product, they look at your operations capacity, they look at your marketing ability. All of that it's done at the branches. And lastly, we've got the market access opportunity, where we provide you with domestic market access, because ideally we want you to be able to have a good market base within our country, so that you improve on your production and your capacity to meet the international standards, needs. And then we give you opportunities through exhibitions and trade missions to countries. And once you come back from that, we put you into a 6 month of mentorship where we want to make those leads that you've received at that exhibition or mission into deals. And that is the crux of the export development program that SEDFA offers. And now we've gone one step further where we are in partnership or in collaboration with our sister organization, SIFA, where we are in the process of forming a trade finance package also, because we see that clients come back, they need to send prototypes, they need to send samples, they do not have the funding for it, they need the capital to get the kickstart for an order that has come through. And SEDFA or SIFA's, the financial component of the agency, is now in the process of formulating a trade finance package where we would be able to provide assistance. Thank you, Corbin.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Leah. And it is, I think, an overriding theme that as a youth entrepreneur looking towards the international market, it's important to understand that you're not alone. All right. There is various organizations, agencies, and programs that share the interest in ensuring that your business is sustainably exporting. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your input, Leah. Over to
sorry, Corbin.
Yeah.
Before you go, I can't believe I forgot about my She Trades program. The She Trades
Go ahead.
program is focused specifically for women entrepreneurs. We are in partnership with the Department of Small Business Development, SEDFA, and in the International Trade Center that reports to the World Trade Organization in Geneva. And we have a program specifically for women entrepreneurs, and we are in our third of almost fourth year of running the program in South Africa. And I want to say we've got some great success stories out of it, where we have clients who are exporting now to Mauritius, in the process of Dubai, and various countries through our trade mission opportunities and exhibitions we provided, and also through the mentorship program. Thank you.
Fantastic, Leah. Again, another great initiative. Over to Mojalefa from Netlac. I think now that we understand that trade policy essentially governs trade between countries, and we institute tariffs, non-tariff barriers, we explore trade agreements in the pursuit of increasing in trade. What are the main goals of South Africa's trade policy?
Good afternoon once again, Coben. I hope I'm audible enough, and I hope technology won't fail me this time. In simple, to answer your question, the main goals of the country's trade policy, it aims really to support the country's industrial policy. So the trade policy is there, it supports the industrial policy. They're not working in silos. And furthermore, it encourages the employment growth within the country. The policy is geared towards fighting the triple challenge that underpins the South African economy. That would be unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And as you know, that South Africa is the most unequal society in the world. The trade policy is there to build industrial capacity, really, because economic growth relies on the expansion and diversification of the industrial sector. That's the importance of industrialization, and we're always talking about industrializing the continent. Then the industrial strategy has encouraged and does encourage value addition, that is beneficiation, beneficiation, and a strong focus on labor-intensive industries such as your textiles, and a focus really on localization in all the strategic industries, and of course to now move away from the over-reliance of trading or exporting commodities, as many of the underdeveloped African countries would do. Still on the trade policy, it focuses on improving the lives of workers, bringing women and the youth in particular into trade, and of course building communities. The policy seeks not only to benefit businesses or traders, but also to benefit the workers, as I've said, women and the youth, and the community in general. I think an example of that, at Nedlac currently, the social partners are engaged in a research study that is looking at including social clauses or labor provisions into trade agreements that South Africa is a signatory. Let me give you an example. If we were to have those, we would have a social or a labor provision in the trade agreement where we would say, as South Africa, we do not trade with a country that has child labor or has prison labor, as an example. So Nedlac is conducting a detailed research into that. We should be publishing our research document in the early calendar year of 2025. But still on the trade policy, I think it really, or to close that point off, it should not, trade benefits should not come at the expense of workers and so forth, and also bringing women and youth as owners and as employees into different industries. And still on that, the trade policy looks at really unlocking the development of the continent. That is the industrialization of the continent. I think one of the speakers has already mentioned the FCFTA coming into life. I think with that, when you look at why our trade policy would look at really supporting the rest of the continent. When you look at intra-Africa trade, Coben, of other continents from South America, North America, Asia, and Europe, the intertrade or the intertrade of those continents is over about 40%, 50%, 60%. They trade with among themselves 6-7 times before trading with anyone else outside of their own continent. But when you look at the African continent, our intra trade, it's in its teens. You find it. They say some would say it ranks from between 14 and 17%. Hence, there's lack of industrialization within the continent. And in closing, I think the trade policy also drives to have manufacturing exports in key industries such as your automotive. Those are industries that the trade policy looks greatly into. And also enhancing South Africa's stance in the role of the WTO, FCFTA, and South Africa pushing for a multilateral trading system, which is what we believe in. Thanks, Colben. I'll stop there for now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mojilefa. You touched on a number of very, very important points. And I think, again, the overriding theme there is that exporters really are the biggest social warriors. They bring in foreign currency, they create jobs that aren't reliant on the local economy, they engage in technology transfer. So the more our trade policy assists with promoting trade from and within Africa, the better our society will be for it. On that note, Mojilefa, I wonder, what would your advice be to youth-owned businesses looking to take their first steps into international trade?
Thank you for that, Colben. My advice to youth entrepreneurs looking at now moving out of the domestic market, really now being an international player, is to be have an honest look at your own enterprise, because one is supposed to have a strong domestic market where they are based before even looking outside. So if you look at the South African economy in the industry that you are in, and you say we've built a strong enterprise, we have a strong market presence within the country, then that would be the time to look outside. Precisely because exporting is not an easy game, especially when you are starting. There are a number of things that can happen, and I think even the previous speaker alluded to that, where you find that you may send through a product, it is stuck at the Tanzanian border, it takes 30, 60 days to get across. The receiver on the other side is telling you that they will only pay once the products are in their hands. So will your company be sustainable? Will your company survive for 30, 60 days, sometimes 90 days without that payment being effected? So that would be the first one. Build a strong domestic market. And when you have a strong domestic market and a strong enterprise, then you can look outside. I would then say also it is important to when you go into an international market, have a local partner who, one, speaks the language, two, knows the regulations and knows the market. It will greatly assist you before you can start looking at going at it alone. So when you get to Mozambique, when you get to Tanzania, get a local partner, work with that partner, get someone who's trustworthy and work with them. And then I would also say, Coben, it would be important for our first-time traders to look at sorry about that, to look at trading with our own neighbors. When you start trading, don't look at going to China, don't look at going to Europe or the Americas. With all the benefits, it is easier and it is better, and it will give you much more knowledge if you start your trading with our own local partners. Start looking at Tanzania, at Mozambique, at Botswana, and the likes, and that will then teach you in the first few years how to then do international trading. I would say the previous partner also alluded to this. Participate in exporter development programs. They're offered by a number of institutions. I think you also alluded to that, from your provincial investment agencies to different departments, DTIC, and so forth. So do participate in such programs. They will greatly assist. And then also know what are the payment methods, or know how you want to transport your product. If you are transporting fruit, you can't transport fruit on a truck where there's no road somewhere going to somewhere in Nigeria or in the DRC. Then it takes forever to get there. Then you need to fly it out. What would be the payment method? What would be the insurance that would need to be in place? How will the payment be affected? Because a payment in Naira, a payment in dollar, and a payment in rand will have big implications for you. So those are the things. What kind of facilities will be used? And the AFCFTA is coming up with some of those answers. In closing, Colben, on this one, I'll say also know the do's and don'ts of trade through that is also offered through the relevant departments. Also, the embassies are a great deal of help. So when you get a local partner, when you get someone who wants to buy your goods in Nigeria, start at the South African embassy. Say, I've been approached by this company. How can the embassy assist you? Can the embassy do due diligence to say the company does exist, the company does have a track record, the company does have a physical address? So those are some of the things. Talk to the DTIC that you are going into those markets. And also, I would urge our first-time participants to also participate in the trade missions that are offered by your Department of Small Business, by the DTIC, or where the DTIC or Department of Trade of Small Business or the provincial investment agencies say they're going to a trade fair in Tanzania and they're taking 20 South African companies. Apply for those, get your paperwork, participate in that, where you'll be in an environment where there are other exporters that are starting out, where there are other exporters that have been in that market for 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. So yeah, in a nutshell, Coben, that would be my advice to the up and coming exporters.
Mojilefa, and it's fantastic advice at that. I think just to add on to what you're saying, the work that I do as the head of projects for ITRISA in export development in the private sector, and I'm sure Leah will agree with this. Exports is not a silver bullet. Exports reward those that are prepared, and if you don't have a stable domestic market, you haven't got your testing, your certification, etc. The export market actually might kill your business. So fantastic points there. Just as a final one, considering the ecosystem that NETLAC plays in and some of the work you do under your mandate, what steps can youth entrepreneurs take to advocate for their needs in trade policy discussions?
Sorry, Coben, I got off a bit. Can I get the
not a
question
problem. Mojilefa, what I'm asking is, what steps can youth entrepreneurs take to advocate for their needs in trade policy discussions? Is there forums, opportunities for them to have their say in the formation of trade policy from South Africa?
Certainly. I would encourage them to fully participate in all forums at a formal and informal basis. Forums such as when there's when a policy is established or when a policy is introduced to Parliament and there is a call for public participation, I would call it youth forums and youth organizations to study those and participate in those. When the president is having a youth forum or a business forum, or a minister or the DTIC is having such forums, I would call for our youth entrepreneurs to participate in those, and also to partner up with established organizations. If you're in the automotive value chain, partner up with others, including BMW, VW, whether you're a tier 1 or a tier 2 manufacturer or supplier, partner up with those. But I would definitely say, and now the trend, if you look at it, trade policies now speak more about women and youth participation. Rather before, where trade policies spoke more about workers' participation and how workers can come into the value chain and how to protect and promote worker rights. ILO still does that. But you find now more and more, if you look at the AFCFTA, the AFCFTA has a standing protocol, sorry, that speaks to women and youth trade. So that protocol, in that aspect, even the WTO has an aspect now. It's looking at women and youth. So I would say they should fully take such forums and participate in such forums. Even at your level of network, when there are dialogue sessions, and experts are brought in from various countries and various industries, I would say you need your youth entrepreneurs to have that youth voice, that continuous youth voice in there, and also pushing for their own voice to be and their own, and also the protocol to be written in their own words and not to be written from someone who's on the other side thinking what is required for youth and women in trade. Yeah, so I would say that, Coben, in closing, it would be important for the youth to take a particular front stance in every policy and every decision that is taken on their behalf, and look at what the Department of Small Business is putting out there, and how does that affect them? What does that particular policy or bill say in terms of youth participation domestically, internationally, when it is through the DTIC or DERCO and so forth? Thank you, Colin.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Great. I think moving on, being cognizant of time, on to you, Palesa. I just wanted to ask, how can collaboration between government, private sector, and youth-focused organizations like the South African Youth Trade Association enhance the impact of trade policy?
My connectivity is not the best. I'm assuming that's directed at me, Coben.
It is, Palesa. You assume correctly.
And you are asking regarding the collaboration?
Yeah, so how can collaboration between government, private sector, and youth-focused organizations like the South African Youth Trade Association enhance the impact of trade policy?
I think it's very critical that stakeholders that are playing in the field of trade actually work as seamlessly as possible. There's no way that in today's world that anybody can really play in the field alone. And therefore, it is very critical as government, as private sector, and as youth entities coming together and ensuring that the objectives that they have set are aligned and are able to leverage off each other going forward in whatever it is that they would want to attain. Collaborating is really important in that, for instance, as government, as DERCO, as DTIC, we have an interlink with international players. And out of that, through the presidential visits, the ministerial visits, then we then are able to bring through DTIC, DMRE, science and technology. We give them a platform from which they then interact and advance the policies that they have, one of them being of trade. And therefore, based on that, if they are to interact bilaterally, if they are to interact multilaterally, but particularly in this case, bilaterally, whatever agreements that have been attained that are for the benefit of youth, in trade, in technology transfer, in reskilling, it then becomes important that an entity like yourself, a BUSA entity, chambers, are then privy to that information, and they can then take that forward to their members and avail the opportunities that Mojalefa, for instance, has spoken about. I think it's Liam who's also spoken about trade missions and things like that. So it's very critical that stakeholders internally work seamlessly, work together to ensure that whatever platforms that they have, whatever mandate that they have, they find alignment, so that we then open up the platform for those that really desperately need the assistance of government. Those that really need is not big business, because they have the muscle to go out into the international fora and be able to play quite successfully. But your SMMEs need to be handheld. They need to be guided. And therefore, it's very critical that there is that collaboration, that there is that working together.
Completely agree. I think alignment within the ecosystem ultimately just increases the probability of success and a return on investment for various interventions. On that note, what programs, incentives, or tools are available within South Africa's trade policy to support youth entrepreneurs? Palisa?
I wouldn't be the one really to speak with authority on that. But I think for us, moving from the Department of Trade and not Trade and Industry, I used to work for Trade and Industry. Moving from DERCO, the platforms that we have, that we then afford, are, we have missions abroad, and through the missions, we then are able to assist, especially because for now, DTIC still does not have representativity abroad in our missions. And therefore, DERCO has had to come in and be a stopgap provide that to ensure that the support that businesses need, they do get. So for us, the platform that we have is the international space that we can then afford.
Unfortunately, it seems that we've lost Palisa.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Sorry, Palisa, you just got cut off there. Go ahead.
So I was speaking to myself.
For only about 30 seconds. It's not a problem. Okay.
So as I indicated, the platform that we afford is the missions that we have, and therefore we then are able to ensure that the trade facilitation that is done by SAYTA, that is done by DTIC, then gets to a level where in the international realm, the support that especially SMMEs need to go and knock, to find out market intelligence about a sector or about a company, to where possible, be able to be introduced by the ambassador to another, whether a chamber or another partner, for credibility's sake. So we have that platform of missions that are available for businesses to use to ensure that they're able to, able to export the products that they have or the services that they have.
Fantastic, Palesa, fantastic. And then just as a closing question, how is South Africa's trade policy evolving to adapt to, the changing global trade dynamics? And what opportunities does this create for young entrepreneurs? I think more to the point, we're seeing a rise in populism. We're seeing a rise in non-tariff barriers. What opportunities have you spotted for youth entrepreneurs in the global landscape?
The reality is that a lot more protectionism is rearing its head. And sadly, that is something very worrisome that is developing. And as you've indicated, there are, and as a result of that, barriers to trade are put up. It then becomes quite difficult to actually enter a market. But it helps so much to always be as unique as possible. But with that, ensure that standards are up to scratch, your product or service is at a particular level. But the more you remain as unique as possible, because there's a lot more market out there, everybody is always wanting, in the global market, everybody wants to be as unique as possible. And therefore, if you are able to bring to market a product or a service that enhances that brings that out, I think there are more opportunities like that in the market. It matters not where you are or where you're looking at. There are available opportunities that through the DTIC, through the mission, we are able to sit with a client and say, okay, you're trying to look at this particular market. We then can do data analysis from the tools that we both have, and we can then help an entity to actually see where there are opportunities, where there is a niche, and therefore it would help to work very closely with DIRCO missions, our embassies or missions abroad, so that they're able to handhold where possible. Of course, DTIC plays a very significant role in that, and therefore, just as SAYTA plays a significant role, so you then, if you are able to harness the expertise, the tools that both SAYTA, SIFA, and DTIC, and sometimes some of the provincial agencies are able to put through, it then gels very nicely once they have helped you internally in the country to then come forth to the embassy, and then we are then able to harness all that, ensure that what is on the ground speaks to the research that has been put through. What Liam was saying, she's responsible for research. But what tends to happen is that once you're on the ground, all that which may be on paper may actually not be what the market really needs. So it really helps, given the context that we have, that are able then to then give a perspective, and based on the data, the research, the support that comes through from SAYTA, SIFA, DTIC, we are able to also bring our part as DIRCO, and we are then able to provide the really depth in the service that we then offer. So opportunities are abound, in spite of there being a lot more protectionism that is rearing its head.
So much, Palesa. I think you made a number of fantastic points. And again, an overarching theme is that with the rise in protectionism, preparation is even more important. Knowing how to navigate the various tariff and non-tariff barriers is going to put you in good stead. Ultimately, no country can produce all that it needs. So there will always be trade. There will always be opportunities available. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Palesa. Moving on to Sandile at the DTIC, I think a question for you is, how can young entrepreneurs align their business practices with South Africa's trade policies to enhance their chances of success in global markets? I know you're responsible for Africa, so maybe even if you can focus on intra-Africa trade, how can we align our business practices with South Africa's trade policies to enhance the chances of success in intra-Africa trade? Sandile, you with us?
Thank you very much for that question.
Awesome.
So you're asking how entrepreneurs can align their businesses with South Africa's trade policy.
That's it, yeah.
All right. First of all, I think as a department, especially in our pursuit of trade policy, we try to align our trade policy with what's happening in the country. So whatever we do in terms of pursuit of trade policy through the trade negotiations, international agreements, we base it on what the country and the economy needs. And therefore, the underlying policy that guides us is our industrial policy and our economic development objectives, especially growth of SMMEs, growth of women and youth in trade, as well as a growth of value industries that are manufacturing products that are value added, that create jobs, and then that also export to international markets. And therefore, we have this in mind whenever we pursue trade negotiations. We have this in mind to protect jobs, to protect our industries. What is therefore important for any business, including the youth-owned, is to understand what agreements we have in place as a country, what are the market openings that are created by these agreements, and then where we have got preferential access in terms of the markets. For instance, currently, South Africa has got various trade agreements all over the world. We've got a free trade agreement with the European Union, which is made up of about 27 countries plus, which is one of the oldest agreements we have. And then within Southern Africa, we've got the SADC Free Trade Protocol, which gives access to markets of about 15 countries in Southern African region. And then within SADC itself, there is what's called the Southern African Customs Union, SACU for short, which is made up of South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Eswatini, and Namibia. In this arrangement, there is free flow of trade, so there are no tariffs at the border. And then internationally, outside within Europe itself, we've got a free trade area, a SACU with EFTA, the European Free Trade Area, made up of Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. And then in South America, we've got a preferential agreement, which is a watered-down version of a free trade area in that it's not substantial all trade. It's with the Mercosur region, which is made up of many countries in the South American region. Also, we have preferential access to the US market through the AGOA, the African Growth and Economic Opportunities Act. And then we have just concluded a free trade area and started trading this year with the African Continental Free Trade Area. So those are the markets that are there. And in most markets, what we do when we open up trade negotiations, we try to ensure that we open up as much as possible those markets. The only areas where there tend to be challenges, even in this area, is on the area of clothing and textiles, and then the area of automotives. And of course, for agricultural products, you need to make sure that you meet the standards in terms of health and safety, the so-called sanitary and phytosanitary issues. So within the DTIC, on international engagements, we've got the trade branch, which I represent. So our job, as I say, it is to open up markets, to set rules for international trade. And then we've got another branch called the export branch. There, what they do, once we finish negotiating agreements, then they engage industry and take them to those markets. Ours is to open the markets, level the playing fields, and set the rules, and then they can take businesses to those markets. So they market our exports to those markets. Amongst the things they do market research, and then they take companies to exhibitions. They also take them out on outward selling missions, so that they can also meet with the buyers on the other side, and then they can market their products, and then they can also reach out and meet other businesses on the other side. And then also within the export marketing part of things, there is also an export development program. Yeah, this is when they take an exporter who's never, or a business that has never exported, then they get them to understand what exporting is all about. Then they get them to understand the culture of exporting, and then they get them to understand the standards that are there, and then they also provide them maybe with financial support to participate in those missions and to exhibit their products. And there are various other programs that are there within the TTIC. And then also on international platform, we also have Invest South Africa, or Investment Promotion Agency of the TTIC. Their job then is to attract investment into South Africa and to also bring potential partners who could potentially, if there's a small enterprise that has got a technology or a particular product that they want to market internationally, or that want to upgrade its production and its standard, they could partner with a company that is advanced, and then they could access international market through that. So those are the various areas in which the TTIC can assist, but we are always ready to share information. We have got workshops that we roll out all over the country where we market our agreements, we explain them to businesses. Many a time when we go out there, we go with the various agencies, we go with the SABS, they can explain the standards part of things. And then we go with agriculture, they can explain the rules for sanitary and phytosanitary issues. And then we also go with SIDA, we go with NEF, so that everything is what is packaged. So those are some of the ways in which we support businesses. So theirs is just to engage us or engage our department with whatever they need, and then we try to assist them. So they must just try to understand what it is, what agreements we have in place, and then we can then answer any questions that they may have. As I said, also then there are businesses there are branches within the GTI whose role is to hold their hand and take them to those markets and educate them about accessing those markets.
Fantastic. Sandile, just on that point, obviously the DTIC also operates a foreign economic representation network, and more importantly, trade attaches in various markets. Now, speaking from some experience, with the programs and projects we run with the private sector, in-market assistance is one of the biggest issues facing exporters from South Africa. How do youth entrepreneurs access trade attaches in foreign markets to assist them with market information or introductions to potential buyers in foreign markets?
Thank you for that question. I think Palisa had just mentioned that at the moment we don't have foreign economic reps out there, but we intend to send them out as soon as the new government has settled in. We had actually offices in London, in Germany, Berlin, and then in China, in India. And then in most African countries, we had some. Formerly one who was based in Washington at some point in time. And then we have in Latin America. So the mandate of those officials is mainly to promote our exports, to find businesses for our companies, as well as to try to attract investment. So they're an extension of what the DTIC does. So at the moment, what would happen is that if an entrepreneur wants to sell a particular product, and then we would look at what product they are selling, and then we would look at what companies in that country are buying those products, and then we would look at the standard that is required, and then we will share that information, mostly working in collaboration with our head office. And then also, if they want to come over to the country concerned, they want to meet potential business partners or buyers, and then we would make appointments for them if they are coming to the country, and then we'll support them in those meetings and move around with them, hold their hand until such time that they meet with the partners, and we assist in the communication to ensure that they speak the same language. And also we would verify whether maybe there is a partner out there or potential partner that is saying, I want to buy these products, this is how much I want, and so on. So we would verify whether indeed that particular partner is authentic, whether indeed they are registered, they are credible, to protect them from being swindled by a company that wants to just take away their money without providing the products. So we are there to as an extension of the TTI, but with a view to supporting our companies to penetrate those markets, to find partners, to export their products, and then to unlock any barriers that they may face in dealing with those countries. And then of course, share information, market information about the country, what kind of customers are there, their standards, their tastes, so that you go there with some understanding as to what that market is looking for, and what they are capable of buying from you.
Fantastic. Sandile, I think, again, an overarching theme is that there's tremendous support across the DTIC, SAYTA, NETLAC, and DIRCO for aspiring youth entrepreneurs looking towards the export market for growth. I just want to say a massive thank you to all the panelists for providing their input, and thank you for everybody in attendance. Thank you to the South African Youth Trade Association for the invitation and asking for my assistance on this. I appreciate it. I know Beauty has left us, Loyolo, so over to Siyabonga, who will take proceedings forward.
No, thank you, Coben. Appreciated. My name is Siyabonga Hans, and I am the treasurer of the South African Youth Trade Association. Just to relay what Coben has just said, we are appreciative, firstly, of the panelists as well as the presenter for affording us their time today to come here and to genuinely increase and capacitate youth-owned reps. We have provincial reps that are here that will take this information down to the provinces that they represent. So now we are moving towards the end of our program, and we are doing Q&A. I will allow for the first round of people to ask questions based on the presentation as well as the panelists' input. I, for one, also have a question I want to ask, but I will leave that question towards the end of the round. So I'll be just taking hands to see who's going to be asking questions within this first round. Thank you. Or I will just do like this. There was a question within the chat box. I will start with that one, and then that's how we will proceed, because some people did write their questions on the chat box. I noted one, which was from Snetemba.
One question.
Saying that besides documentation or certificates, how can one as an SMME determine whether they have dominated the local and domestic market? I think that is the first question, and I'm also noting one colleague here, Uvimbani, has also a question. Can you unmute yourself, Vimbani, and ask?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Luvo Vimbani. I'm from the rural parts of the Eastern Cape. Mine is not a question, but a comment rather. Over the years, obviously, I've been a big proponent of one-stop shops for small business development, particularly closer to small and rural communities, because access to information does remain a barrier. Obviously, it doesn't mean that information doesn't exist, but it's about how we get that information to the end user. A couple of years ago, I served as the youngest councillor in Nelson Mandela Bay and on the Economic Development Committee. And it became apparent from the onset that SMMEs, or the term SMMEs, is attached to a negative connotation because of the violence that was associated, that was normally associated with it, which has exposed itself as construction mafias, as we call it in this day and age, amongst other things. So youth in business do exist, and obviously the biggest issues that remain there are the issues of formalization, compliance, and expansion, and obviously what we speak of in terms of access to markets, and even on the foreign front as well. At one stage, obviously, there was an issue, or there was programs that were being run by Tusong centers, as they called them, who had become a hub of reference for small businesses and access to opportunities. But obviously, a lot of that fell flat due to a variety of issues, including maintenance, budget availability for programs, etc., etc. Again, the different entities that are here today are a representative, or normally work in silos, because they are different entities. But we need to then get to a point where we have a sense. We're meeting Nati. Sorry about that. They are separate in nature and not necessarily work as a clearinghouse all at once. It would have to be certain departments or certain entities or certain institutions that do come and say, we've got this proposal, please come together at a particular point in time. So if it's not already in motion, or previously done, I strongly believe that we need to do a feasibility study on one-stop shops across different districts, which would bring in the different sectors that we work in, including small development, DTIC, COGTA through maybe its district development model, and the NYDA, obviously by extension, just to find a permanent solution where people can actually have points of reference when it comes to small business development in particular. For example, cannabis farming has been a way of life for many years in the Ortamo district. You have access to a lot of land, but in terms of the bulk sale, it remains an underground activity, which, even with the amendments to legislation, if, for instance, a person goes to their local economic development office, it's very rare that they'd be able to get all the information or assistance that they need. And so the access to information obviously becomes a barrier in that instance. So what a study would do, for instance, in this case, it would be able to identify this gap and have a specific type of one-stop shop or clearinghouse that is relevant to the district that it would actually serve or operate. And I could go on, but I'd be taking up a lot of your time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Luvo. Your question has been noted. Mochalefa, just for clarity, I see that your hand is flashing on my side. I just wanted to know that, are you putting your hand up or what is that? Because it shows then it's on and off from my end. Just a clarity before I continue.
Siyabonga, no, I was not putting my hand, but I am on the floor. On the other question that you had posed, I might just put one or two things to it. In terms of when do you know that you've now have dominated the domestic market? The company or the enterprise must ask itself questions and be honest in answering those questions. Simple questions such as, have you satisfied the local market? Is your production capabilities beyond the local market? Let me make a simple example. If Volkswagen is producing in South Africa, and South Africa only takes 200,000 cars a year, do they have the capabilities to then produce 300 cars? If the answer is that it's yes to your company, then you say then we must look for markets outside for the other 100,000 cars. And then, is your company financially sustainable or to survive the export environment? Because it's not an easy environment, especially when you are starting. And then product competitiveness. Let me give you a simple example with what we see now. as the Chinese brands on our roads, where a couple of years back and decades back, you'd see the Chinese, they would introduce their cars to markets such as South Africa, but they would find that their products were not competitive at all, whether it was on reliability, durability, on style, on comfortability. So their products were not competitive. They couldn't compete with their own neighbors in Japan, your Toyota, your Nissan. In all of those aspects, they couldn't compete with the Americans. They couldn't compete with cars from Europe, Germany, and the likes. But now what they've done, they've improved their products. So you also need to know if your product will survive in that particular market. Also, some simple things at times, even packaging. Are you now moving from a country that is a Christian dominated country? Are you moving to a country where did you not take plastic in a good way, and your product is packaged in plastic, and marketing and all of those things? Then that is how and when you can tell that when you've answered those questions, that we are now ready to look into outside markets. But if to any of those questions the answer is no, then you are not ready to look into international markets. You first need to answer those questions, say we are competitive and we will be competitive in the market that we are looking at. We do have the production capacity, we do have the finances, we do have the know-how, the knowledge to say we can start exporting to Mozambique, to DRC, to Tanzania, and Nigeria. Yeah, thank you, Hans. I just wanted to put those. If my hand will still be flashing, Hans, it's probably just malfunctioning or something. But I'm here if there's any other question. Thank you.
Coben, can I come in? Sorry, Chair, not Coben, the Chair. Could I come in?
Yes, you may, Leah.
Thank you. Okay, ideally, we always want exporters to have a good domestic market, but that is not cast in stone, because there are times that certain products are your product has a niche market outside South Africa, even though you manufacture it here. I'll give you an example. We've got clients who do mohair, that is goat hair, and they are based in the Eastern Cape. Now, mohair products, number one, is very expensive. Number two is that it is not meant for South African weather. It is more for Scandinavian and the European and American regions. So you're not going to look at the local market here. So number one is for you to identify where is your product needed most. If it's something that is needed in South Africa, then you would be looking at one of your main characteristic or area factor that you would be looking at is that have you moved in from, let's say you started from Cape Town. Starting from Cape Town base, you moved on to Western Cape, and then you've started moving on to the provinces. You've covered all the provinces in South Africa. Your brand is well recognized in South Africa, and you're getting the revenue for it, and you've already saturated the market. Now you say to yourself, okay, now you're ready for the international market. So those are some of the key areas that you need, that will be the telltale signs saying whether you're ready for international market or you still need to permeate the local market. So it's not always the case where you need to look at domestic. There are certain products that needed outside, but generally it's whether you look at your geographical movement of your product with the country that you're operating in, and if you've operated everywhere else, you see that your revenue is increasing or you've increased substantially, and you see that okay, there's enough of my product here in South Africa, now I can start expanding. That is the next process. Because remember, one thing with export is that as much as you want your product to be selling in South Africa, starting an export journey is a different chapter on its own. It's a different journey altogether. And that start of a journey of export takes a good at least 3 years to start that process of export. I mean, we've got clients we've taken to for missions and exhibitions in 2021, and they've only started getting a deal now after all the negotiations and back and forth and getting themselves certified into that market. So it's an entire journey on its own. And that is a very costly affair also, because you need to look at, if you're going to get your product trademarked, you're going to get, whether you need your product to be patented, whether you need it, all of that costs money. And you need to be able to do your market research. You need to consider, how are you going to distribute your product? Are you going to look at, is it you that's going to do it? Are you going to find somebody locally? So there's an entire an entire export plan that you need to have in place before you consider export. So once you've ticked off all the checklists and you are ready, then you yourself will know, okay, now I'm ready for the market. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add to what you're saying there, because I think you make a very, very good point. The phenomena of globally born businesses has been increasing for a while. And something I just want to reiterate is we're not just focusing on product exports here. There is also the exports in services, which often the exports in services do take a globally born approach. So really, the dominating of the domestic market is really dependent on the product that you're selling. And there's a rationale behind that. For example, if you're manufacturing shoes that are not price competitive in the domestic market and you don't have a domestic market for it, well, then the likelihood of you being internationally competitive is very, very low. So it's not a hard and fast rule. It's more of a guideline that proves credibility and operational capacity.
No, thank you, Coben. Thank you, Leah. That was very insightful. I see that Sbahle has his hand up. Sbahle, I will allow you to come in and ask a question. Seeing that Luvo was more of a comment and the one in the chat box, Coben has answered the question there, I would allow Sbahle to ask a question and then propose that there won't be a second round of questions, also looking at the time factor. So if you do have a question, just put up your hand, as I will be asking a question right after Sbahle. Sbahle, come in.
Good day, guys. My name is Sbahle Khanuga, based in PE. I run a company by the name of 360 Plant. My question is sort of basic. It goes to what the speakers were speaking about. With SAYTA, there's the manufacturing scheme and there's the youth challenge fund. So obviously there's a thing of localization, which is the policy of basically South Africa for youth and all SMMEs. But now, how does this bridge the gap to access to finance to the youth? Because obviously for youth, we're dealing with the challenge of asset bases not being up to standard. And then what is the conflict of interest of someone applying for a youth challenge fund and at the same time applying for the manufacturing fund? Can one do that through one entity, or do you have to create two separate entities? Thank you.
I think the question is towards Sisuke. So Sisuke, can you come in?
Okay, thanks, Sia. Thanks for the question. Was it Sihle or Sipe? Sorry.
It was Sbahle.
Sbahle. Okay, this is something that I will have to go and find out from our colleague from SIFA, and then I can come back with an answer to Luyolo. Is that okay, colleagues?
That's perfectly fine, Sisuke. Perfectly fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think let me ask then the last question from this segment. I will be asking a question which is towards Leah and Botsandi Lekini. In terms of when you look at trying to increase the manufacturing sector within South Africa, it's not all, but you need to look at basic pillars that are essential for this to happen. You would look at your education, that how do we make the manufacturing industry and skills the go-to zone in terms of specialized labor. If you say that to a young person that they will never say they want to grow up and be a textile or to be someone who does upholstery. So how do we make that sector something that is a go-to for young people? And then secondly, when you look at your incentives, what are the progressive policy for tax breaks and also industry-based incentives that can pull in the investors and businesses to the various municipalities on the ground and provinces at a larger scale. And then without speaking about manufacturing, you cannot overlook land in terms of, if you look at the Nelson Mandela, where Uvimbane comes from, there's a history there of derelict buildings, that you have your abandoned buildings within the CBD not being utilized, but the city also faces a high unemployment rate. So how do we then cascade a process to say that where there is appetite for those buildings to be turned into manufacturing hubs, how can then the DTIC, working with municipalities and offering maybe technical support, cascade that process and accelerate it to make sure that even the municipalities are manufacturing hubs? Because we will speak about reindustrialization in South Africa, but in terms of building within these basic pillars, we won't get there. And for Ulia being considered, how do we then help entrepreneurs on the ground in terms of accessing this and also making sure that we have hubs within the townships, and in terms of reindustrialization, the township as the township policy commences. So it's just that one question, which is twofold.
Maybe I can start, Sia. With regards to the township and rural development, SAYTA has the TREP program, that is the Township and Rural Enterprise Program, and there we focus on your sponsor shops, your motor mechanics, your hairdressers, all of those thriving economies in the township and rural areas, where they fund the businesses in order for them to be developed. That is one thing. And another thing is that our with regards to the manufacturing support, SETFA or CIFA's, the financial institution wing of it, has a manufacturing support program that has incentives for the manufacturing support arena. Sadly, our biggest problem is that many of our clients, I'm seeing this on a daily basis, where clients who've got fantastic products, but they do not have the space to manufacture. And it is a big problem that the municipalities do not have the infrastructure in place to be able to support these manufacturers, to be able to create a hub for that. And then with regards to how do you create that culture, SAYTA has an entrepreneurship program for entrepreneurship for schools, where we are trying to build entrepreneurship mindset from a school point perspective, where it should not just be students looking at, or learners looking at a 9-to-5 job. You should also consider the entrepreneurship aspect and get the necessary education based on entrepreneurship, and consider starting businesses. So we do have the entrepreneurship in schools. If the youth want to tap into that, we've got the specialists who deal specifically with that. And there are competitions. So some of the learners, they do fantastically well. The schools get the recognition for the great initiatives that the learners have come out with. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Mr. Chini.
Thank you for that question. Firstly, on the one about increasing manufacturing, I think the main thrust of the TTI at the moment is to drive manufacturing development, because we believe that manufacturing is a sector where jobs are still being created, where there is real value in terms of the exports, in that when we export those products, they support factories on the ground, they create more employment, and the growth of our factories are mostly dependent on the exports that we send out there. So there's a lot of incentives that really support manufacturing, and we've got different sector plans ranging from automotives, agro-processing, sugar industry, the poultry industry, the steel industry, up to machinery products and stuff like that. So there's a range that the TTI has which I am willing to share with SAYTA to share with members. And then in terms of the support we provide to different cities and municipalities, government as a whole, they've got what's called the district models, in which working with the Department of Local Government and the whatever they are, I think they're called now collaborative COCTA. Yeah. So there were programs in which we work as national government with the different districts and municipalities, where we look into their development plans, what is that they are trying, what industries they want to create, what projects they have on the ground, and then what facilities they can offer to investors. And then we work with them to develop plans for such projects. And then also as part of the special economic zones, we also have in the different provinces special economic zones in which we try to attract investments. And in each province, there is a provincial investment and export promotion agency. In the case of the Eastern Cape, there is the Eastern Cape Economic Development Corporation, but all the provinces have got those. And within the municipalities themselves, they've got also the economic departments, which are also doing the same thing. So whatever we do, we align with what's happening on the ground by ensuring that we help them to package projects so that they become tangible projects that are bankable. And then agencies such as SAYTA, such as ITC and NEF, they also help to scope those projects, and then they prepare them to become bankable. And then they also invest sometimes a certain portion of equity with a view to encouraging attraction of more funding to those projects so that they become viable. So there's a range of things that we do, but whatever we do with the local partners on the ground. In the case of FPE, we work closely with the ECTC, and then also the municipalities are quite active in Quebec in terms of promoting economic development. And within the TTIC, we've got a program on local economic development. They are the ones who are driving collaborations with those provinces for local and district projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chini. That's it from my side in this segment, which is Q&A. Just again to thank the colleagues, the panelists for answering the questions, as well as the provincial reps and young business people that are here. I know it's towards the end of the year, and it's always been speaking about year-end fatigue, but thank you, colleagues, for being here. I will hand over to the president of the association, Mr. Loyolo Dwesi, to do a vote of thanks for everyone. Thank you.
Greetings, colleagues, again. I would like to offer my gratitude again to all participants, especially the panelists and Suzuki, for her presentation, including my colleagues from SAYTA. Big thanks to you guys. For us as young people, it's very important to have such engagement, and especially to hold policymakers accountable. But you cannot hold policymakers accountable by howling. You have to be proactive by coming with solutions as a young person on the barriers that you are currently facing in the ground. We have a better understanding that for us to accelerate a robust economy that addresses youth challenges, youth inclusivity must be a priority and a meaningful one. And it's better to come with policies that would enhance our participation within trade. As we know that trade is one of the fundamental economic concepts, and which can play a vital role in our GDP. And as young people, we cannot be left aside, especially in different sectors. I see also Jabulile coming from the agriculture sector, and she sent me a message. I'm sorry, Jabulile, but I can't keep secrets. She just sent me a message saying that she offered gratitude for this session, and it was the first time to hear about the program that was presented by Leah and Suzuki. And we'll have more of these engagements also next year, as we are also looking to have more physical engagement, as we are also working hard in terms of resource mobilization to have physical engagement with young people across the country. But nonetheless, thank you. And then other follow-up will be done. And we also want to promise everyone that is here, will send the recordings of the meeting. And yeah, thank you very much, colleagues. And that's my closing. Thank you, Chairperson, Co-Chairperson of the meeting, Siyabonga, and thank you to the facilitator, Mr. Corbin Thompson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, colleagues. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.